Hello, everyone. Thanks to join this session where we will be speaking about the future of API management. We'll be focusing on what is code-driven API magic, as the title of the session is saying, how we at Soul revolutionize gateway, developer portal, and something very cool that I love, which is GraphQL. So who am I? I'm a field engineer here at Solo. My name is Jona Apelbaum. I'm based in Madrid, Spain, but very excited to go to Helsinki next week. With me, I will have App next week, but today I'm presenting this pre-recording alone. So nice to meet you, everyone, and hope you enjoy the session. So what will I be talking about? One is I'm going to talk to you about a brief introduction about what we do as a company, what products we offer. I'll speak to you about the API gateway that we have. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about GraphQL, developer portal, and then obviously, as the title says, everything you see in this presentation can be done as code, which is GitHubs, platforms, everything today that goes around everything as code is something that we believe very strongly here at Solo. And obviously Q&A, which we won't do in the pre-recording. But if you have any questions, you can obviously ask us offline. As I showed in the beginning, there is my details. You can find me on Slack, on LinkedIn, wherever you want. So who is Solo? What do we offer as a product? So we have a product called Glue Platform that essentially offers three different products inside that platform, or solutions, better said. One is the API gateway, where we manage the node south traffic. Why do we need API gateways? Because when you take a look at an application stack, developers very often have to implement things like authentication, rate limiting, and so on into the application stack. And we need to be able to abstract that away from the application to a gateway solution, which is what we're going to talk about essentially today, right? On what the gateway solution does and how does it connect to the rest of the applications. In this case, also we'll be talking about GraphQL. Then the second step what we offer is service mesh. So once you pass that node south traffic, once you secured, authenticated, authorized your application, how do you then secure your east-west, your internal traffic? Which is the second product that we offer as part of solution we offer as part of our platform. And then, of course, there is an underlying technology on the networking layer, which is network acceleration, thanks to eBPF, enablement mesh, which is a solution that we bring out in the future, which is Istio and service mesh, but without sidecar. Obviously, we won't be talking about that today, but it's part of the platform. Why do we call it platform? Because that's what it is. It's a platform that offers you a set of solutions to be able to accelerate your application deployment, your cross-cluster application networking. So let's go into details about what Glue Gateway is. What we offer with Glue Gateway is a few use cases that you can implement, right? That you can offer as part of your API gateway. One is load balancing and routing, right? How do I load balance to my underlying services? Imagine you got a main gateway, you got different clusters with for failover or for high availability reason, and you want to load balance or route the traffic to different clusters. With routing, we can also go do multi-cluster routing, as you can see here. So one gateway can be used to route traffic to multiple clusters. Traffic control, imagine you want to do things like canary deployments, blue-green deployments, and so on. Advanced security, you want to be able to connect, for example, to a certain identity provider, be able to connect and be connected to your gateway using a certain token before it gets connected to the underlying application. This is what I was talking about, is to take away the authentication process from the application and bring that to your API gateway. Then you got threat prevention, things like access policy, web application firewall, rate limiting, data loss prevention, all this type of thing. And very importantly, something that a lot of people have challenges to implement properly is how do I add metrics, access log, tracing, so observability stack as part of your solution. So, and last but not least, everything centrally managed, right? So we got our platform that manages everything centrally. So even your multi-cluster management can be done using a central platform, a management platform. So instead of managing all these clusters separately, you want a central platform that can configure all these things without the need to go into each platform and configure things. This is our Glue platform, which allows you to do that multi-cluster management. So API gateway, again, what we do, we take the Istio ingress and we elevate and we make that a full-fledged API gateway. We add things like a developer portal, which we're going to talk about. We can do transformation, developer self-service, GraphQL versioning of APIs, and so on. So we take the Istio ingress, what is available, and we make that an API gateway. So we used what is available out there, and as you see, we add enterprise features. We make it an enterprise-grade ingress API gateway. So if you take a look at the way that the API management is evolving, from full lifecycle API management, we moving to the API gateway. How do we manage the API gateway from a developer perspective, like GitOps, API versioning, rate limiting, etc.? How do we manage this API gateway internally? But more importantly, how do I externalize and catalog my APIs? And how do I manage that? And how do I connect that developer portal with that API gateway? So Glue Platform offers you a combination of both, which offers you a developer portal that can then be configured automatically using our Glue gateway. What will you get out of it? An API catalog, an API. Sorry, let me put like on do not disturb here. Sorry for that. An API key management, so you can dynamically generate API keys, API Explorer, and so on, which will go on into more details in a few slides. Okay, perfect. So let's have a quick look at GraphQL. So we have a quick look at what our gateway does. What is GraphQL? If you take a look at the API landscape today, you got a bunch of REST APIs, right? And to consume these REST APIs, there's two problems. One, you need to understand how each REST API needs to be addressed. And the second problem is overfetching and underfetching. Overfetching is I need one field out of that API, but essentially I'm going to request, I need to request the whole set of data. Imagine I need just the user ID or the username or the email address, but essentially usually I will get the complete set of data, which is overfetching. The other side of this is underfetching. Some APIs will offer you a field per field, so I need to do a bunch of API requests to get one single field. So GraphQL is here to solve that, essentially. It's poor efficiency. It's not very easy to implement. So GraphQL is here to solve that. Essentially, it's a query language for your APIs. And essentially, you're going to query exactly what you need out of that data set. So imagine I need the username of somebody or the address of somebody. I'm going to query exactly what I need. How does that work? You got a schema that says, okay, how will I address that API centrally? So the first problem of having all these REST APIs, where the developer needs to understand how to call all these REST API. Now you got one language, one API, which is a GraphQL API, that can address all these backend APIs. So that's the first problem that we solve. How do we solve that? Each developer or each API team needs to write a resolver on how their API gets called, essentially, to simplify it. The schema then connects this API call to the resolver to the backend. This is how we connect these systems together. So if I want a product, for example, here ID5, in the backend, GraphQL sends it to resolver or a set of resolvers, because perhaps I need to call multiple APIs to get my response. But essentially, GraphQL makes the connection between that single language and the backend APIs that it needs to call, right? So essentially, you got single API call to do everything. API is always fully described by a schema. API only returns the data I need, scales to multiple client use cases. Result, substantial reduction in developer toil, so essentially quicker route to market. Again, consideration when using GraphQL APIs. On the application interface, obviously heavily simplifying it, and on the application network is things like authentication, rate limiting, observability, web application firewall, and DLP, data loss prevention. And as I mentioned earlier, application interface, you prevent things like overfetching data and underfetching data and things like that. Cool. So how do we implement it quickly? Essentially, we integrate GraphQL into our proxy, into our gateway as an extra filter. So if you're familiar with GraphQL, usually requires an external Apollo server or an external infrastructure to implement everything. Essentially, what we did, we integrate that into a gateway, which is Istio, which is Envoy, where we implement an extra filter that does the GraphQL piece. And the GraphQL piece can connect to REST API, gRPC, or another GraphQL. Let's talk a little bit about Glue Portal now. Glue Portal brings all of this together and offers a developer-friendly developer portal, right? It's one of the things that it can offer. So essentially what we do is you develop your API. You can then, thanks to annotation, discover and create your API docs. The API docs is presenting these API products into the portal. So you got different products into the portal, like you may have a pet store product or a pet food product, I'm just saying, as an example, and you may have different API products. This is presented to the portal, and the gateway presents this in an easy-to-consume API developer portal. If you're familiar with Swagger, essentially you can import your Swagger specs. We will automatically create API docs based on the Swagger specs and present that to as a developer portal. How does that? Here is an example. So you get a catalog of all your APIs, essentially, where developers can browse through and can get access to and understand how to call APIs. They can, here you go, this is all the products that I was talking about. You can have different categories. You can have a real good experience for your developers to consume your APIs. Here's another example of how as I mentioned, there's different catalogs, different products that you can expose on how to call these things. And I mentioned, you get a Swagger-like interface. You can also have a more classical interface. You can actually test your APIs at the same time. And one thing that is very cool is the fact that we can also include API keys management. We can even include plans. So we can have a users, for example, with a premium plan that has a certain API key, and they can have a certain rate limit, for example, or a basic plan that has a lower rate limit. So you can define certain plans, and each user that's connect gets a certain quality of service assigned to him, a certain rate limit, for example, a certain set of feature, or access to just a certain set of APIs, for example. So you can we have the option to configure plans there as well. And very exciting, we recently integrated Backstage. So if you're familiar with Backstage, we are there as a Backstage plugin. They can connect directly to Glue platform. And last but certainly not least, GitOps, everything as code. So everything I showed you until now is all done via CRDs, all done via APIs in Kubernetes. So all the configuration of the complete platform can be done with CRDs. So essentially, what is the idea here? You got your CI, right? You test, IDE, build, etc. And essentially, using your Kubernetes GitOps, you can then just go and deploy, observe, and then manage using Glue platform, of course, because as for the operations, using Glue platform and the underlying technologies. Again, just as an example, how will somebody apply it? Ops or devs, because you can have different teams collaborate on the same platform. They create a policy. The operations creates a policy. Developers creates their apps. Essentially, GitOps takes over and will deploy that into the cluster automatically. Because everything is as code, it's very easy and very GitOps friendly. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions, please contact us.